That's fun.
Long ago, in the days of the pioneers, before there were cars and telephones and computers, there was a boy and girl who lived in a sod house in the Great Plains of the United States. Now, the Great Plains were covered with lots of tall grasses, but there weren't many trees or rocks, and so people would cut that rooted prairie grass that grew very thickly down into the earth. They would cut it into large blocks, and they would use those blocks to make their houses and the roofs on their houses. They were called sod houses. Well, when the children would go outside their sod house, this boy and girl, they could look way into the horizon, and all they saw was that sea of grass, tall, blowing in the wind. One day, the boy and girl's parents took their horse into town to get supplies and left the boy and girl at home. Well, they were bored, and the boy said to his sister, "Let's go have a great adventure. Let's go explore the prairie." His bored sister readily agreed, and so they packed water and some bread and some meat, and they set off walking in that great prairie of grass. They walked and they walked and they walked until they were very hungry. Then they sat down and ate their food and drank their water and got up and walked some more. They walked and walked and walked, and then they were very tired, and so they lay back in the tall grass and they looked up at the clouds in the sky, and they began to make pictures from the clouds with their imaginations. They saw a horse, they saw a camel, they saw a bird, they saw a woman with a blowing dress, they saw an angel. And then they were tired and they both fell asleep. What woke them up was the smell of smoke. "I smell smoke," said the little girl, and they saw that lightning was hitting about head, was hitting the tall grasses, and the clouds were dark thunder clouds, but there was no rain. And that lightning, when it hit the dry grass, the grass began to burn, and a great fire was spreading. Well, the girls and the boy, they got up and they saw that there were animals, rabbits and ground squirrels running, and deer running towards them. And they, away from the fire, and they took to their heels and ran with the animals as fast as they could. They ran and ran, but their legs were not so long, and pretty soon they could smell the fire, they could feel the heat of the fire, and they were so afraid that they were going to get burned up. They ran as hard as they could. Their hearts were pumping in their chests were burning, their legs felt like they could not run anymore, but they kept running and running, and the smoke got so thick that they didn't see where they were running, and they ran to the top of a hill, and suddenly they stumbled and they went tumbling down, rolling, 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 and they landed in a shallow creek at the base of this hill. Well, the boy and girl hugged each other and they pulled themselves down into that shallow water with only their faces sticking up. And the fire came roaring down the hill, and it jumped from one bank of the creek to the other. Their faces were covered with ashes and smoke, but they were saved. Well, when the fire had gone away, the boy and girl picked themselves up out of the creek, and they climbed the hill, and for as far as they could see, it was all burned land. And they had run so frantically, so afraid, they did not know where they were. They did not know how to get home. They began walking in circles, ever widening circles, trying to find some kind of landmark that would show them which way to go home. The night sky was coming, it was getting dark, and the stars were coming out, and they were so lost and afraid. They cried, they yelled for help, but they were too far away from home for their mother or father to hear them. And then, as they were so exhausted, they lay in the burnt ground and looked up at the sky, and in the sky they saw their grandmother who had died the spring before, who they missed so much and loved so dearly. And their grandmother came down from the sky and landed before them, and she reached out with her arms. The children ran to her and she hugged them and kissed them. And then she rocked them to sleep. Well, in the morning when they woke up, their stomachs were growling, and they said, "Grandmother, we're hungry." "Oh," she laughed, "you're always hungry, my children. Follow me." And they walked a ways, following Grandmother, and they came to some bushes that the fire had not burned, and those bushes had berries on them. So the brother and sister feasted on the berries. And then Grandmother said, "Follow me," and taking their hands, she walked them and walked them and walked them. And another day passed, and it was getting dark, when in the distance on the horizon they saw their sod house. And they were so excited. Thank you, Grandmother." "Now I must leave you," she said, "for I no longer am to live on the earth. I live up in the sky with the sky people." "Oh, please, 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 Grandmother, come home with us. Mother and Father would be so happy to see you again." "I'm sorry, my children, but I do not belong on the earth anymore." And she kissed them both on the cheek, and then she drifted back up to the sky. Well, the boy and girl forgot that they were very tired, and they ran as fast as they could to the house. And when they got to the house, their mother and father welcomed them with hugs and kisses. And they were so happy to see them. They had tears coming down their cheeks. But then they got angry and they said, "Children, you must never wander off like that again. We saw the remains of the prairie fire and we thought we had lost you, that we would never see you again." "Oh," said the children, "we were saved. We were saved by our grandmother who died last spring." "What?" said their parents. "She came down from the sky and she showed us where there were berries we could eat, and she led us right back home." "Oh," said their parents, "I don't think so. I think you just imagined that. You dreamed that your grandmother took care of you and brought you safely home." Well, the boy and girl did not believe their parents. Every night when they looked up at the sky, even when they grew up and became parents themselves and had their own children, every night when they looked up at the sky, they remembered their grandmother. And they felt that the sky people were watching over them and that they were safe and protected here down on earth.